founder of Simple Chic, and joining me in conversation to talk about everything about women's wardrobe stories and experiences is Robyn Hayes. Robyn Hayes is the founder of Nosey Parker. Nosey Parker is an insights and creative agency specializing in qualitative research. Welcome, Robyn. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks, Mira. It's
I
good here.
love the red lipstick. I think
Yes,
every woman needs to have a touch of red. Sometimes, there's particular days where you just need a touch of red to give you a little bit of extra energy and boost. Do you agree?
it's one of my signature looks is my red lipstick.
Well, and the red that I particularly love is exactly what you have on. It's almost that sort of scarlet red, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just, I love it.
Thank
Well,
you.
I'd love to start the conversation by just asking you, what are you wearing today?
So I'm wearing a secondhand Marimekko jacket. I'm not sure if you can see it. It's not quite vintage. I think I should know the particular designer, but I don't. I should have looked it up beforehand. And I bought it from a dealer that I buy a lot of clothes from in countryside Finland, basically. So she
Oh,
collects vintage and old Marimekko and Vuoko, other sort of Finnish designers, and resells them. So I think I
and
bought
I
this
love
from Instagram. Yeah.
it. Almost has the pattern almost has a little bit of a Japanese feel to it as well. Would I be
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, could
Yeah,
do. Yeah, it's probably some sort of abstract flower or something, I think. So that's it. This t-shirt, I can't remember where I got it, but I've had it for like a long time, as with most of my clothes. The jeans are reproduction 1950s made by a friend here in Sydney. My earrings are secondhand. I probably would have bought them from Etsy, I think, a long, long time ago. And that's it.
oh,
Yeah,
well, you look stunning.
thank
And
you.
it's interesting. I love the t-shirt. It's one of those classic pieces. The white or the red or the blue stripes.
Yeah.
And interesting enough, my son has actually been trying to find one,
Oh, okay.
and he's struggled. He has actually grown up with sun, but isn't it interesting to how sometimes those classic pieces that we have in our wardrobe are just so hard to find?
My first one from Remo, I think it's maybe pronounced Remo, which was a
Hmm.
little shop in Sydney on the corner of Crown and Oxford Street. And he made those traditional sort of, what are they called? The Breton shirts or something like.
Yes.
I think they still make them actually. So I've still got my first one that I would have bought in whenever they first started business, which may have been the very early 90s or something. So
Yes.
it's gone through the wash and it's sort of slightly pink now because it went through with red pants, but I still wear it.
Now, or maybe I shouldn't ask who was doing the washing on that day. Was it you
It
or
would have
someone
been
else?
me. It would have been me.
You just needed a little bit of a change up, I think.
Yeah, right. Make everything
Absolutely.
pink.
So tell me, do you have a fashion style?
I do. Yes, I
You do.
do. Very much so. So I have two. So one is I collect a lot of vintage clothes, so it's my
Hmm.
style comes from that. So I would say a few years ago it would have been mostly 50s vintage, so that's quite
Yes.
hard to find now. And as I've gotten older and my waist has expanded a little bit, it don't always fit into all of those clothes. Nor do I have the sort of, well, I guess in a post-COVID world, those glamorous things to go to wear those things have kind of dissipated a little bit. So until they
Yes.
come back, I don't always wear that. So probably about 5 or 6 years ago, actually, I started getting into this kind of Finnish designers. So
Yes.
Marimekko, Vuoku in particular, and that's what I collect mostly now. So I would say my style is eclectic, vintage, colourful, bold. That would be how I describe it. So I always get comments on the way I look. I mostly often wear a beret, but I did my hair today, so I didn't wear the beret. I have about 20 different ones. Some are old and thrifted, and some are new where I just happen to pick up a colour that I haven't got yet. So, yeah, there's sort of the accent, the cherry on the top, as it were.
Absolutely. Well, we've known each other for a little while, and
We
I
have.
know every time I have seen you, you have always looked absolutely, stunning,
Thank you.
and just timeless, and I think you have always shown up as your authentic self, which
Mm,
is what I would wish for any women.
mm,
to actually have that.
And once
Can
I
I?
found that, I was so much happier. Like honestly, so much happier because it
Wow.
allowed me to step, and you're probably going to ask me this later, but it
Yeah.
allowed me to step outside of the fashion cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And once I
Yep.
understood what my own style was, what my body shape was, how I wanted to look, and for me, getting dressed every morning or again every
Mm.
night if I'm going out is a creative act. And
Oh, I
I
love it.
love, I have a room full of shoes and handbags and
Yes.
hats. And I have, my vintage dresses, and I've got it's all in different sections. And then I've actually appropriated the linen cupboard in the hallway for all of my, like, accessories, the
Mm.
sunglasses, earrings, brooches, bangles. I've got, oh my God, so many bangles, bracelets, that kind of thing. And I think in my head, what am I going to wear today? And it's like that opening scene of the movie Pretty in Pink where she's just grabbing things out of the drawers and
Oh,
everything.
I
And it's
love
the
it.
getting dressed in the morning is really fun for me. And I think about who I'm
Absolutely.
going to see and what I'm going to do and how I want to feel. And I dress accordingly. And sometimes I will go, no, that's not right, and I'll get dressed again.
Mm. You know what I love about what you've said? I was reading an article not so long ago, which is on the topic of consumption, and it just talked about the notion of consumption takes, creativity gives.
Mm,
And I think creativity, when I think about creativity, it's just joyful.
mm,
And I think everything that you have shared with us, so far, I love what you've said about just stepping out of the fashion cycle,
mm.
and how empowering that would actually be. But I'd
Yeah.
love to actually know what triggered it. How did you just wake up one day and you kind of found your style, or was there someone who actually influenced
Well,
the path that you've
yeah,
taken?
I went in and out. I went in and out. So I was, have been part of a lot of different subcultures over the
Mm,
years, starting from a very young age.
mm,
And even before that, actually, I used to look through, I sewed, and so I used to look
yes.
through my mum's old patterns from the 50s and the 60s, and I loved those old, like, Elvis
Oh,
movies and things. And so I would
mm,
make those kind of clothes
mm,
because that's how I wanted to look, and I couldn't buy them in the shops. Then when I left school, I started clubbing. So it
mm,
was the 80s, the early 80s, underground clubs, were amazing, real like club kids. And I couldn't buy what I wanted, so I would
yes.
make things. So
Yeah.
I think it started from there actually, and I would design something in the morning. I'd go shopping for, bits and bobs, and then I would sew it in the afternoon. I'd get my mum to sew me into it. Then I'd go out clubbing at midnight till like, I don't know, 5 or 6 a.m. And then I'd have to like sleep in it and get it cut off me the next day. Like when
I
I wake
love
up.
it.
So it started there, and then I started working, right? Went
Yes.
into a corporate role, and my boss told me I was scaring people. So then
Oh
by my
no, I don't believe
haircut
that.
and the way I looked, and so I was really young, and I didn't have enough of a sense of self to just
Mm,
say, well, perhaps I'm in the wrong spot. You're not right for me, rather than trying to change myself.
yes. Yeah.
So then I went through what I call my lost years,
Mm,
where I just dressed kind of like anybody else. And that's when
mm,
I was on the fashion treadmill, as I like to call
yes.
it.
Mm,
Then I got back into my subcultures and in my 30s. And that's when I went, no, I'm not interested in this 6 week cycle of having to keep
yes.
up with the
Mm,
right shade of lemon and the right
mm,
kind of heel. And, I remember going to a shoe shop in Paddington one time where I was buying shoes for a job interview
yeah.
and a suit. And the lady said to me, oh, this heel style will still be current for 6 months. And I
Oh my
went,
Lord.
what?
Yeah.
6 months? I went,
Yeah.
I've got shoes in my cupboard that I bought. I've still got my first pair of
Mm,
Docs that I bought, you
yeah.
know, in the early 80s. I
Mm,
keep things for a long time.
yeah.
So I was like horrified that she thought that was like a real win and
Yeah.
unusual.
No,
Um,
absolutely. And you just reminded me of something. As you know, I spent some time living and working in New York, and it actually brought it home to me, just how seasonal things were.
mm,
As the new season was coming in, every single store was discounted by, 70, 80, 90%, because they
mm,
literally just wanted to clear the floor. And growing up in Australia, like, we've had sales, but not at that depth.
Mm,
And I remember one particular store, because it literally was just a clearance for the next season. It was just crazy. But I remember the Benetton store at that time, everything in that store was like $10, which was
mm,
just, and it just, for me, for the first time, it really hit home how cyclical it really was. But
mm.
I can't imagine
Yeah, so
hearing
I think if you have a
six
style rather
months.
than,
Oh
I know,
my God.
if you have style rather than fashion, then you're never out of fashion. You know,
Yeah. And
you're not
your
in it,
own style, your
your
own
own style.
style.
You're not in fashion, but you're not
Absolutely.
out of fashion. And,
Mm,
I have, I march to the beat of my own drum. I
mm,
create my own looks, and
yeah,
I like that.
absolutely.
Just kind of like the last thing I bought, or one of the last things I bought was a full length kilt, a reddish kind of full length kilt. And
Oh,
I wore that out last weekend because I thought that'll be great for winter because it'll
it'd
be
be
warm,
stunning.
and
Yes.
different from pants.
Mm,
And I
mm.
wore it with this thrifted 80s suede fringe jacket, some cowboy boots, a red beret, and it was like a black top. And it was just awesome. And I didn't see anyone else styling a kilt that way or even like wearing
No,
a kilt. So
no.
I love
But
that.
and and just like that, or Sex in the City has actually obviously just, come back. And I think part of why women were so attracted to watching the show, and it was obviously so fashion driven, but I think the way Kerry wore things,
Mm,
was very liberating. She didn't necessarily follow trends. She always, and the way she even sort of, or her costume or stylist did, just pairing different things together that you would otherwise not think about. There was a sense of freedom about
yes,
it as well. So
yes,
I think
absolutely.
fashion definitely can be, I think, joyous and fun,
Mm,
and it's very much this creative act, and not
mm.
to be at this oh, to use the word that
Beck
you've
and
used,
call,
beck and call, or
Yeah,
whatever it is, of this treadmill, continually pounding you down, um,
it's such a relief
is
to get off
such a
that
relief.
treadmill.
But
It's a
I was
relief.
just sharing with someone else as well. Women spend over 200% more annually on clothing than men do.
Mm,
This treadmill also is having an impact on women's financial prosperity and
mm,
longevity
mm.
as well, which is not a good thing at all. Robyn, on the topic of color, and I know you love color, and I think we're at such an interesting stage at the moment where there are such wonderful communities out there that are actually talking about age positivity for women. There's lots of discussion also about periods, and bringing out everything that women actually go through at different life stages to the fore without any shame, and through storytelling. So I know of one particular color that you celebrate with some of your female friends and colleagues.
Yeah.
Would you like to share it with our audience today?
Yes, so it's the color red, which is no surprise. And when I went through menopause, I thought, you know what? This is a stage of life to be celebrated. Like, actually, I couldn't wait. So I was like, let's have a party. So I got my best gal pals. We went out for cocktails. They're all in the vintage scene as well. We all
Yes.
put on our best red, head to toe, vintage clothes. Some girls even wore red shoes too, red lipstick, of course. And we went out and had cocktails. And of course, what happens then is people come up to you and go, what's this like? Like, firstly, they'll say you all look amazing, and secondly, it's like, what's this red club that you're? What's going on? And so
And
then
knock,
we
knock, can
go,
I come in?
yeah. Then it's really interesting. So the young men that ask us are normally a bit pissed by the end of the night, and they're like, "Oh, power to your sister," kind of thing. But the young women, that's where it really gets interesting
Wow.
because they're just like, "Oh my God, I love this," and then they'll bring their friends
Oh,
over and tell their friends to come and, meet. I'm getting a bit teary, to come and meet us as like revered
oh,
elders, sort of thing. So
yes.
it's lovely. Yeah, it's
Oh,
really nice.
isn't that wonderful? I saw something just popped up in my feed, and this particular woman, and it was around age positivity, and just really being quite irreverent to say, well, guess what? I'm 50. I am
Mm,
not dead. I'm
Mm,
ready to live the next part of my life.
mm.
And if I want to wear my hair long, just because previously society has told me to shorten this and change that, well, you know,
Yeah, look, I think
that's
that
not
whole
what I'm
thing
going
is
to do.
ridiculous. I
Mm.
love Ari Seth Cohen and I love the advanced style. First it was a blog, a photography series, a blog, and now it's books and everything. And I follow a lot of those women actually, and I love that. I'm starting new businesses and
Oh, there are so many women also who are wonderful role models who are about to hit 90,
mm,
who are still using their voice and who are in the media. So I just look forward to seeing what the next generation actually
mm,
brings along.
I agree.
Um, there is such a disposable culture around clothing these days, and I think post-COVID, even more so, the acceleration and some of the transparency and knowledge around fast fashion and how much clothing is being sent to landfill. Um, what are your thoughts and feelings about that? And are they shared with some of your peers?
Mm. Yeah, look, I think it's horrific. And the interesting thing is that I didn't come to my vintage secondhand thrifting kind of life because of that, because it was the sort of 70s and 80s when I started doing, probably the 80s more actually, when I started doing that. It was just because I couldn't find the kind of clothes that I wanted, so I would go and buy dead people's clothes, basically in the op shop. Um, and it wasn't until later that I kind of got this added benefit um, of having clothes that were having a second or third or fourth life, because all of my
Mm,
vintage friends, we sell to each other, so it's our own little circular economy because it's so precious.
wonderful.
There are like
Mm,
little buying groups globally where we'll say, I've got this, is anyone interested in buying it? And people will have a bidding frenzy and that kind of thing because they're rare. These pieces are rare now.
yes. Mm,
So I find it horrendous. I have always tried to buy good quality things.
yeah.
So I have a favorite pair of, well, when I used to go see clients face to face, this favorite pair of Bianca Spender wool gabardine pants
Mm,
that I would have bought maybe 15 years ago, I guess.
mm,
And they're lined and they
yes.
look as
Hmm.
good as the day I
Absolutely.
um, you
Yeah.
know, they're just incredible. They don't
Yeah.
need any care. They're just like they
Yeah.
just last and last and last. And so if you buy something once, and that's the thing, you've got to
Mm,
know your style, you've got to know your shape, you've got to know that
mm,
kind of thing first, because then you don't make the mistakes, and then you can invest in those really good pieces that might be. I think they were
yes.
$500 at the time, that or
Yeah.
$400. That
Mm,
was like an insane amount of money for me. A
mm,
stylist actually got me to buy them, and I was like,
mm,
oh, I think this is a bit
yeah.
much. But they have lasted me. I wear them summer and winter because wool
Yeah.
gabardine is like it's a good fabric that breathes.
Hmm.
And I've gotten so many wears out of those kind of things. I hate throwing
Absolutely.
things away.
No.
I hate
And it
it.
goes back to not the unit cost at the time that you buy it, but it's kind of the cost per wear
Mm.
over that time.
Yeah,
And
I
I've
rarely agree, and I rarely throw things out because I'm very careful about what I
mm,
buy
yeah,
now, because it has to be better than the same thing in my wardrobe. So, say like
yeah,
a jacket, it's got to be better than this one, or better than my other favorite Marimekko one, or
mm,
sufficiently different that it will get an outing during the right
mm,
season. Otherwise, you've got things in your wardrobe that never get to see the light of day, because you've got too
absolutely.
many of those winter coats or too many of those jeans or too
Yes.
many of those blouses or, dinner dresses or whatever it is. So I
Yeah.
have to think carefully. And of the
Mm,
things that I do buy new, I think I was telling you the other day that it'll be like maybe you're going out, say it's a t-shirt or something, it'll be something I'll
mm,
wear out.
yes.
And then it becomes an exercise t-shirt and then becomes a gardening t-shirt and then
Mm,
it gets cut up and it goes to my husband's workshop. So it has, what's that, 4 or 5 lives. And,
absolutely. Mm,
I grew up knowing how to mend clothes, knowing
mm,
how to sew. I don't sew really much anymore, but I mend.
mm,
Taking shoes to the cobbler to give them extra life.
mm.
Sometimes fighting with the cobbler who says it's not worth it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, I really like these shoes. They're vintage. Just resole them, thanks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've done the same. And, one of the things that to me, you've used the term, you exemplify really the essence of a circular economy.
Mm,
And really, buying a quality from the outset, something that's already had a life, and you're doing everything possible to keep that in circulation and extending its life.
mm.
I think what's wonderful as well, there are different things that globalization has done for us. Globalization has kind of fueled fast fashion, more economies of scale, but I love also it has actually brought different communities together. And at this stage of life, to actually find new connections and women tribes that are aspects of us around the globe, and to be
Oh,
communicating with them daily is the coolest. I just love it.
it's amazing. I found
It,
some really good people through, just things like hashtags on Insta,
yeah,
where I'd follow the Vuoko or the Marimekko hashtag just so I can buy things, because a lot of stuff
yes,
gets, and has for many years, gets sold on
mm,
Instagram. That's how I buy most of my vintage clothes. And then you'll start following each other, and then you'll start chatting. And I think the lady that I bought this jacket from, actually, I said to her, there was this exhibition of Vuoko, a retrospective of Vuoko
mm,
clothing in Helsinki, and I knew I wasn't going to get to Helsinki before it ended, but I really wanted the exhibition book, and to have it
yes,
sent from the Design Museum was going to cost €60. And I was like, that was 3 times the cost of the book. And I was like, no. So when I bought this jacket, I said, can you buy the book for me and put it in my package, and I'll just pay you for it? And so she
yeah.
did, she just
Oh, I know.
didn't charge me for her time or anything. It was just like
Yes,
so lovely, really nice.
absolutely. And if we go back generations, I think clothing was a very female community led, so full of connection. We have our local hairdressers, you go down to your local seamstress who would mend and alter and bring your clothing to life if you weren't able to sew. And that was, a dear friend that
Mm,
had and, grew up with at different stages. And, women would get together, in terms of, whether it was knitting,
mm,
hubs or whatever, in the winter months and so on. So I think to allow technology to actually give us that community and reconnection back to clothing in a
yeah,
more circular way, I just is fantastic, and
it is
it's been
fantastic.
wonderful to see more of it, because I
Yeah.
think there is also in the last 50 years there's been so much knowledge lost, where even in terms of cross-cultural designs, where certain crafts and skills would be passed on to the next generation, um, that I think we've lost a little bit. But tell
Mm.
me, my mother had an influence in terms of my fashion style, and I had some beautiful custom pieces made for me. And one of the oldest pieces that I have in my wardrobe, Robyn, is a little red dress.
Oh,
And, and I think clothes have a story
yeah.
as well that's just embedded. And this little red dress, as you may recall, I was actually born in Croatia. We came by an Italian cruise liner to Australia. And that Christmas, I wore this little red dress, which is over 50 years old now. On at, I still have in mint condition
Yeah.
this beautiful little red dress in my
Beautiful.
wardrobe.
Yeah.
I haven't had any daughters, but maybe I'll have some grandchildren that I could actually pass it on.
Yeah. Nice.
So I think loved pieces last, and have memories and storytelling behind them. And I just wanted to ask you, and we all have different relationships with our mum. Are there the skills around clothing and things that she may have passed down, even how you care for your clothes currently or what you wash them with? Be interesting to know what is being
I
passed
think
down to you.
my mother's passed away, but mum, sorry, I don't think she had the fashion gene so much. So, no, I was an oddity in my family. What she did teach me to do, though, was to sew. So I learned to sew
Hmm.
at school, but mum and I used to sew a lot of things. So we made my one of my two of my formal dresses, I think, together.
Yes.
So I found
Mm.
this design in the city somewhere that I couldn't afford, and I just sketched it. And I said to Mum, "Let's kind of make it." So we found like a,
Yeah.
basic bodice, and I handmade the rest of it. It was like these petals and things. It was the 80s.
Mm.
In organza that I hand beaded and the whole bit for my Year 12 formals. So she helped me sew a lot of things. I learnt to knit, I can do a lot of those kind of feminine crafts. So I come
Yes.
from a long, long line of creative, crafty kind of women. I guess
Yes.
maybe that was more common back then, so maybe everyone has that
Yeah.
image. But I still have like a stack this big of tablecloths that my mother embroidered. You could buy these kits that were sort of
Mm.
had a pencil line of the
Yep.
picture, and then you'd buy the
Hmm.
kit of embroidery fabric. And so she would embroider the long tablecloth, the napkins,
Yeah.
the runners. They were all in a set, and so I've got all of those that she made. I never used them, of course, but I've just still got them.
And
Victoria as
I
well.
I I have those beautiful linen pieces as well, and there is a new generation of young designers who are now buying off those beautifully embroidered, which you may have seen, beautifully embroidered vintage tablecloths, and
Mm,
actually turning them into dresses and other garments.
all right.
And some of the pieces that they're putting together are absolutely stunning,
Mm,
and it goes back to just beautiful natural fibers, beautifully handcrafted,
mm.
have
Handmade
longevity.
things. Yeah, handmade
Yes.
things are amazing.
Mm,
And you know what's nice is that my nieces now, I've got two, one's 20 and one's
mm,
17, and they're both getting into knitting and crocheting. So I have my
yes,
20-year-old niece actually just texted me while we were talking saying, Auntie Rob, what ply wool should I get for
I
this
love
top
it.
I'm knitting? Because she came over last night and raided my huge box of vintage knitting patterns and
Mm,
picked two, and I'm trying to help her translate the old wool and the old ply, all this, the old
yes,
knitting things to modern day. So she's gone off to a second-hand sewing shop to buy yarn because she's at uni and she can't afford,
yeah,
yarn's expensive now.
yes.
So it's nice that the circles come through
Oh, I
again, and
love
I'm
that.
now,
Mm,
teaching them the things that,
mm,
my mum taught me, which is
yeah.
lovely.
And I absolutely love that. And I just think, and I'd be interested in given your research background. I think there's almost two drivers to that. That generation that is Generation Z, my son's age, your niece's age, there's so much conscious in terms of the impact certain things have had on our
Mm,
environment,
mm,
which is fantastic. So there's the sense of responsibility and how they can make things better. But I also think there is this new young creative economy that's coming through,
mm.
which is just beautiful. Where
Yeah,
otherwise, I think perhaps when we were a little bit younger, they were seen to be less. Um, I
they
think
were
there
daggy.
was.
Let's face it, they were daggy.
I think it was different stages. Yeah, it was kind of, oh my gosh. Yeah, so I think this resurgence of this creative economy and the most, I think it was during the Olympics. I don't know whether you see him. There was a UK Olympic swimmer who's an avid knitter and he's in his 20s.
Yes, yes, I saw
Oh,
him.
wasn't he amazing?
He was great. Yeah, yeah, he was.
Here he is, he just had one heat and he's up in the turnstile in between his next Olympic heat and, race and there he's knitting, which is, and I think given, all of the anxiety and stress in the world, it's also such a mindful thing to do because it just
Absolutely.
centers you. I find that when I crochet or knit or sew or anything, it's other than when I go swimming and do laps, and I'm not a big swimmer, but it's the only time that my mind is just so 100% focused and no other thoughts seem to enter. Do you
Mm.
find that?
I do. It's an activity that's very mindful because you have to
Mm,
concentrate, particularly if you're doing something that's quite complex. I think
yes,
cooking is the other time. I agree with the swimming, and
yes.
cooking
Mm,
is the other time because I'm following, like, there's the set, the chopping, the stirring, the this, the that. I find that quite stress relieving as well.
yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. I wanted to finish up and ask you just a last couple of questions, I'd love to, given, you've grown up also in the media space and marketing space, research space. What are your thoughts around the narrative around how women are actually perceived and body and how much social media is actually influencing how women feel about them and their bodies and how fashion has how
Mm.
fashion is tied into that?
Look, I think there's probably a lot already been said in that space, and people could
Mm,
probably comment more eloquently than I can,
mm,
but I just kind of ignore it, I guess,
hmm.
because I just think it's so damaging.
Yeah.
I would hate to have a daughter
Yes.
right now, or even a son, actually. I just think it would
Mm,
be an absolute minefield.
mm,
I have, I guess, with my nieces, that's my experience where I've tried to
mm,
get them to look, I take them to markets and we go to Surrey Hills markets, we go to
mm,
Newtown op shopping and vintage shopping. They go op shopping in Newcastle, where they're from as well now. And I
mm.
encourage them to, you know, buy things that they love that just
Yes.
suit their body and make them look good, and
Yes.
sort of to get them to step outside fashion the way I stepped outside of
Mm,
fashion. I think you said something the other day that was really fascinating that I still am thinking about, which is that most other markets cater to a customer and customer
mm.
satisfaction, and you know sort of trying to fulfill the customer's needs is paramount to the
Yes. Mm,
brand, whereas fashion is very much we
mm.
decide, you just take it, and
Yes.
they don't really
Mm,
care. And you can see that,
yeah.
as you were saying, in the sizing and
Mm,
the shaping that kind of doesn't fit feminine
no.
bodies. I've got a
Mm,
very curvy body, always have done since I
mm,
was 12. I was very curvy, and
mm.
things just wouldn't fit me. They just wouldn't,
No.
pants that would fit my
Mm,
hips wouldn't fit my waist, for
yeah.
example. And it's frustrating, and that's actually another reason why I went to 50s clothing, because they
Yes.
catered for the feminine body.
Yes.
So there was a much
Mm,
bigger ratio between waist and hips, and so those clothes fit me beautifully. They almost always fit me perfectly. Whereas
mm,
if I go and try and buy a pair of pants or something
mm,
now, A, it won't hit my waist where I like it to hit because that's more
mm.
flattering for my body.
Yes.
It will gape at the back if it fits my
Yes.
hips. And I think, well, why
Mm.
am I going to pay money on that? I'm just going to have to go pay to get it altered. I may as well,
Alteration. Mm.
yeah, I'll have to get a pair made. I'll just get a pair made, you know?
Absolutely. No, you touch on a very important point, and the irony is, sizing got introduced, some standards internationally, in the 70s. Over that time, given fast food and more sedentary lifestyle, our bodies and shapes have changed,
Mm,
and then fashion brands have deviated from those sizing by brand. So it's such a confusing piece for women.
mm,
It's even worse if, you're over size 14 or 16 because you're totally excluded. But also interesting enough, which just talking to the lack of customer centricity, even within sizes, there was a wonderful UK study that actually just did an overlay of sizing and body shapes. So in reality, whether you're a size 8, 16, 24, wherever you are on the spectrum of sizes, within that individual size, there'll be 5 different body shapes, let alone different heights. So
mm.
in reality, even within a particular size, that size will only fit, to all 20,
No wonder there's so much waste.
absolutely.
And they
So I
have to
think size
discount things. It's so stupid.
size is definitely a problem, but you're right. I think that's the thing that really honed into me was, I think both you and I, throughout our careers, I had very customer centric roles,
Mm,
looking after customer strategy engagement. How do you optimize that experience? And what that always involved was sitting through loads of quant studies, focus groups across the world, understanding, well, is this product going to resonate with our customers?
mm,
The features, the benefits, how does this brand positioning resonate? And yeah, it was a bit of a ha-ha moment for me that, oh my gosh, this industry that has so many challenges it really needs to transition away from and be
mm,
disrupted. But one of the most fundamental things is how they survived by completely ignoring the customer and having this continual top-down approach.
It's a bad
Um,
relationship, isn't
it's
it?
just, but
It's a toxic relationship.
and you'd think that relationship would not be sustainable. And then you think about also the average size in, stops around 12 or 14, and the average size of a woman in developed countries, whether it's US, UK, here, is 16.
Mm,
What other industry would ignore 50% of the
mm,
available population?
mm,
And you're right, there it's kind of, well, here's a buffet, you choose what you want. If you don't want anything, well, we're certainly not going to do it a la carte.
mm,
And I think whoever is able to start to shift the narrative, which is what we're trying to do, shift that
mm.
narrative and provide more customer solutions. And yes, of course, they're going to have to be a little bit more extra cost and quality. Um, but I really, yeah, so it's like
But you
for
know
you,
what,
it's kind of
Mira?
I
You know,
boggle, my mind
I know it
boggles.
does, the mind does boggle. Whenever I've had clothes made for me,
Hmm.
because they're made to my proportions, if I lose a bit of weight or put on a bit of weight, those things always fit me. So
Yeah,
I've had skirts made, to my measurements.
yeah,
They will always fit me
yeah,
because it's my proportions and it might be a little
absolutely.
tiny bit tighter, but that still looks good. And so if you
Yeah,
get things made for you,
hmm,
they will last a lot longer. Then you've
yeah,
picked the fabric, you've had it lined, for example, if it's like I'm thinking of a particular pencil skirt that I had
yeah,
lined and it's like
yeah,
it sits really nicely, it doesn't
absolutely.
buckle
And
up, you
it,
don't see your undie line, that kind of stuff because it's really well made. And I don't think it
mm,
costs me any more than
mm,
than something I could have gone and bought in,
yeah.
David Jones or something.
Absolutely. And it just takes a little bit more effort. But I think the reality is women don't know where to go these days,
Mm.
unlike before, or even where to, buy fabric or any of that. So I think there's a whole education opportunity that, because I feel as though almost with the contents that are available, I think, and I'm a marketer, obviously, but as a marketer, marketers have been really cheeky in the fashion industry. They've just chosen not to disclose so much information where I think so much IP has actually been lost over time. So even when they may mention what the fabric is of that garment that's available online, they might say, "Oh, it's this beautiful premium crepe." Well, crepe is not a fabric. You can
Mm.
have polyester crepe, you can have
Mm.
a natural fiber crepe,
But people
and
don't know
women
that.
don't know.
They don't know that. Unless you
Precisely.
sew, you don't know. You don't know.
Exactly.
It has
No,
been lost, I
absolutely.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And who
So
checks how many people go into a
labels.
store and check the label anyway? You know,
Mhm.
like I'm a real feeler of fabric, so I have to go
Oh, it's
feel
so tactile.
the
Yes.
fabric, and if I don't like the feel of it, no, sorry,
No,
no.
absolutely. And I won't even get into, our skin is our largest living organ.
Mm,
It's porous. Why wouldn't you want to actually have something that is more tactile, sensory, and actually is healthy for you rather than something that's been derived from fossil fuels?
but also
Um,
they don't last. I remember many, many
mm,
years ago when COS first came. I hope it's okay to mention a
yes,
specific
yeah,
brand,
yeah,
but
of
came
course.
into the market, and they have like their stuff was cheap. It was good
Yes.
looking stuff, nice designs, quite cheap, great colours. Like really,
Mm,
the year I bought
yes.
some things, they were really bold colours.
Mm,
And then I washed them, and I like know how to wash things. I know how to hand wash things. I know how to like I've got
yes.
a front loader, gentle cycle the whole bit. I know how to wash knitwear, and these things peeled like you wouldn't believe. And I remember going back into the store and someone asked me about something, and I said, "Oh, look, I would never buy that type of fabric again from you because it was
Yes.
a one wash wonder." And
Yeah.
it's in the rag bag now. It's
Yeah.
like too weird to wear gardening because it was this floaty sort of thing, but it's like it's gone to the rag bag. Sorry, and I hate that. It's such a waste of
Yes.
money, my resources, but also all of the other resources that have gone into it and the poor person that's sewn it and.
Absolutely. And it
And
does. It just takes an extended amount of time. But I think changes are coming. I
Mm.
think there is more, even versus 5 years ago, there's more transparency around, and the right questions are starting to be, asked. And so I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful because I think there has to be, a better solution into, for women's physical and mental health,
Mm.
because there are so many other exciting things to do rather than be scrolling, trying to find whatever you're trying to find,
Oh my God, it's exhausting.
to buy. It
It's
would be
exhausting.
exhausting, but also I think it's just so confronting in terms
Mm.
of, well, I found it, but it's not in my size,
Mm.
and all of that. And I think, it just takes away from the many roles that women have to do. And I think we need more women like you. I think it's, to be off the treadmill and have a sense of self and a sense of your own style,
Mm.
and to have, this level of comfort. I think for me is inspiring,
Thank
because I even the industry, that I'm currently trying to champion. Um, I find it challenging because, my body shape has changed, and I have resorted to actually making things as well,
you. Mm.
because I've been excited about some of the fibers and the fabrics that I've been able to find, as
Mm.
well, and the tactility of them.
Mm.
So I think I'm inspired by your nieces, and I'm inspired by, all of the IP and all of the wisdom that you're actually, imparting on them, because I think that's part of what we need to do as a community of women, as well. So I
Mm.
celebrate you.
Ah, thank you.
And, Nosey Parker, I love the name.
Thank
So
you.
if anyone would like to, be able to work with you and learn a little bit more about Nosy Parker, or have some, research studies that they'd like to undertake,
Mm.
where can they reach out to you?
So my website probably is the best, so
Mhm.
www.noseyparker.com.au.
Excellent. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Robyn, for
Mira. It's
joining
been
us
a
today.
delight.